Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Latest Updates in the 2016 Intacct Summer Release. I'm Megan Turco, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go over how to use your webinar console. The orange arrow on the right side of the screen will let you toggle the control tray open or closed. And at the bottom of the control tray, you'll see a chat window. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout today's webinar via the chat function, and we will get to as many of them as we can during the Q&A at the end. Also, on your GoToWebinar console, you should see an area for audio settings. If you're calling in through your telephone, please choose the Use Telephone option. And alternatively, if you're using your computer speakers, please select the Use Mic and Speakers option. Additionally, I would like to note that today's webinar is being recorded. We will send out the slides as well as a link to the on-demand recording of the webinar within about 48 hours. So definitely keep an eye out for that message if you're interested in accessing the webinar after today or sharing it with any colleagues who couldn't make it with us live. And with that, I would like to introduce today's webinar presenters. First up, Manesh Patel is a manager on Armanino's Intacct team. Manesh is a certified Intacct implementation consultant with knowledge in various ERP systems, Concur, Basecamp, and Dropbox. He has experience with technology companies, including cloud startups such as Livebox. We also have Brenda Collar with us today. Brenda is also a manager on our Intacct team here at Armanino. She has over 15 years of accounting experience in Big Four public accounting and in-house as a controller. Prior to joining Armanino, she led an Intacct implementation for a 50 million nonprofit operating in over 20 countries. It's great to have you both with us here today, and with that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Manesh to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate that. So welcome everyone to release number 3. This is really our key area, kind of almost as a continuation to release number 2 this year. Lots of different updates with regards to workflows. Project accounting has been a key focus area for Intacct as well over the past few quarters. So we'll have some updates to share with you with regards to that. Distribution and inventory. So some of the big updates from our release number 2 was that warehouse is now a dimension for inventory control module. So we'll talk about some of the various enhancements there. We've got other enhancements with regards to order entry, reporting and insights, and kind of beyond that. So definitely looking forward to sharing all these updates with you all. So let's get into workflow updates. What's nice about this slide here is that Intacct has introduced a feature called spend management. Some may actually refer to it as spend control. And what that allows you to do, specifically right now, you're probably all used to creating budgets within the general ledger. And those budgets, of course, in Intacct are driven by the GL account number, and then you can assign it with various dimensions, and then, of course, budget over a certain period of time, or even forecast over a certain period of time. And based upon that current functionality, how you're probably utilizing budgets is obviously to put it into a financial report and then be able to compare budget versus actuals and do all the kind of the data around that. What Intacct has introduced in this release is a spend management feature that ties more to budgets beyond what the original reporting was. So now we're noticing a theme where budgets are pretty much actionable. So spend management actually just integrates directly into the purchasing module, and what it's going to allow you to do is maintain control over your spending. As a user who may be utilizing, or our clients that are utilizing the purchasing module for the various types of workflow features, it's nice to be able to know and input a budget so that when a purchase order may be submitted, you can actually insert a warning or actually even stop that purchase order from going through because it exceeds the budget amount. So what this feature does is it hooks into the purchasing module, and it allows you to actually assign multiple types of budgets. Those budgets can then be validated based upon dimensions, so just like what you're used to within the general ledger, and you can then assign them by transaction so that that warning or that stop can occur. So that's where some of the automation exists. So outside of what you were probably already doing, which is just reporting off of budgets, this actually goes in and puts in a control for you. So this example right here, and I know it could be a bit hard to see, but we've got a purchase order here for the Acme company, and as you can see, based upon certain line level criteria such as the amount, maybe a department or a location tag, it's going to go ahead and state a warning up top that says this transaction exceeds the limit that was set into the budget. Based upon that limit, it's up to you to actually reach out to that budget owner to either get approval prior to continuing or actually have that budget owner make an adjustment to that budget. So now we're seeing that you've got a lot more authority over how to do your spending, which has definitely not been the case in prior uses of the budgets feature. So I think definitely it's going to be very, very popular to include this in purchasing. And it doesn't have to just be on the purchase order transaction. It could be on any of the transaction definitions that are associated with the purchasing module. So how do we set it up? Is obviously the next popular question. For the most part, if you've got purchasing, which I should say that all clients, a part of their subscription should have access to the purchasing module. Now, it may not be utilized or built based upon the different business cases for our clients, but spend management, as I mentioned, hooks onto that purchasing module. The setup is pretty easy. Once it is configured, you're going to go in and actually create a individual budget, and you're going to as well include the dimensions that you want to tag. So just like you were used to within the standard budget feature within the general ledger, you're just choosing an account and all the various dimensions that are associated. Part of that as well is to choose a budgetable period. So it may be a certain month or it may be a certain calendar year end. That duration as well is a part of that budgetable period. And then once that part is complete, like I mentioned, step 4, you're not actually going through and just hooking it to the purchase order. All of the purchase transaction definitions are available. So you're going to actually go in and utilize which documents you want to assign it to. What's nice about this feature is in the case, and many of our clients have different types of purchasing workflows based upon their different use cases. What's nice about this is you can actually go in and insert a new budget or spend control based upon those workflows, and so it gives you kind of a lot of flexibility, pretty much 4 steps to go through and utilize it. And I think you'll notice, and you can even test this out, you'll notice definitely some good areas in terms of being able to kind of put control measures in. All right, so what's next in terms of workflow updates? Pre-printed check stocks, and I've actually had quite a few clients with Canadian entities over the past several years, and we've always stated that if you've got a Canadian entity that you operate from, you are not able to utilize pre-printed check stock. Pre-printed check stock is only for clients that are essentially based out of the U.S. So prior to this release, those Canadian entities were utilizing blank check stock that was printed from Micker Inc. compatible printers. And so what Intacct came out with in this latest release is basically Canadian check stock. So if you do have a Canadian entity, and I know many of our clients do, you can actually just go into the Intacct marketplace or this website, formsforintacct.com, and actually order those Canadian pre-printed checks. The setup is also very straightforward. You're going to go into the checking accounts record, and just like you would assign a pre-printed check stock in the U.S. or your blank check stock, you would go in and assign it with this Canadian one. So nice feature that I think has been a long time coming. Another area with regards to workflow updates is, if you recall in your implementation that we've done with you, those configuration screens, one of the popular questions we were asking you is, what's the summary frequency for how you want to handle your transactions? What does this really mean? Well, within your subledgers that exist in Intacct, those transactions that you're performing within those subledgers all get batched. And before this release, the popular way of batching them was daily. So let's just say I had 100 bills that I entered, AP bills that I entered throughout the day. Well, when they do get batched on a daily basis, they essentially fall into these transaction summaries that land to the general ledger. And so what Intacct has came out with is the ability to do per transaction summaries. Why is it better than or could be more efficient than the daily? Well, it's going to include a faster processing time. So this is a popular way to kind of essentially, if you have transactions that you're importing through like an API or through CSV templates, you don't have to actually wait for that daily batch to get developed. You can actually do essentially a batch per transaction. This has been popular and already a feature, a part of, for example, order entry, which is an extension to the accounts receivable module. Many of our clients who are porting in transactions through an API or some other type of system, this is definitely a feature that has been available in some of those extensions, and what Intacct did was make it available for standard AP and AR. So speedier summary and frequency times is definitely something that you get out of this.
Okay, next up we have some exciting expansion of the capabilities under project accounting. So the first one is expanded transaction rules. So transaction rules, if you recall, are the items within Intacct that facilitate the ability to do those complex indirect cost allocations based on cost pools, as well as to be able to do the unbilled or revenue WIP postings. So with this new feature that they've rolled out, previously you could only do these transaction rules by GL group alone. Now they've added the ability to also add in employees or employee groups. So this, the most common application for this is going to be able to do different rates for your employees and your contractors. So contractors often have different indirect and direct rates than employees because they're not fully burdened, and oftentimes they're billed out on separate lines for your projects. So that's an exciting change here. The other one, and the one I think we're most excited about, is building on the release that they did in the second release this year on the Gantt charts for resource scheduling and forecasting. Now you have the ability to do dependent tasks. So in the picture here you can see the dependent tasks visualized by the red line. So this allows, when you're creating those tasks, you select a dependent on task option in the task screen in the project module, and then once the task is selected, has reached its end date, only then will the dependent task be able to begin. So this is great if you want to, for instance, make sure that you have received assigned SOW before you begin your first tasks there. The other exciting development here is multi-segment scheduling. So you'll notice in the middle here we've got Louis Stereo, and he's scheduled on the same task for 2 different durations. Previously, you were only allowed to schedule one resource to a task for one duration of time. So that didn't give you any insight as to when they would actually be working on the project. So for instance, if there was holidays or planned time off, or if they were just working on another project. So now you're able to actually schedule them to the task as many times as needed to show when they will actually be working on that item. And then the last update for resource scheduling and forecasting is there is a cost and revenue forecast reporting now. So there's new reporting objects that have been added within the object, and it allows you to gain sight into how much your planned and forecasted projects will make. There's new ability to do calculation for hourly labor cost, as well as projected margin on your projects, which can be really helpful when you're trying to determine who you want to schedule on your projects if you're dealing with people with different rates. A couple other quick updates to project accounting. Now, in the previous release, actually, for actual billings, we introduced the ability to see your actual billings in preview mode of the generate invoices.
And so this time you have the ability to create a custom document to use the word merge tool to add that to your invoices. So in order to do that, you'd go over to customization services or platform services, depending on what your instance was implemented with, and then go down to custom documents, and you can either add or modify those documents that are there. The other release is an update to the API. So if any of you have an integration with any of those third-party expense report systems like Concur, Expensify, or Nexonia, now your API, you can select the expense report to reimburse from the third-party system, where before you could only reimburse or mark the expense as paid manually. So now you can do it via the API.
Great, thanks, Brenda. And and I'm actually going to be talking about this as well shortly, but definitely in that custom report wizard, there are new objects that are coming out very, very frequently. So keep an eye out there. Obviously, it's easy to kind of get overburdened with so many objects that there already are, but we'll make sure that we kind of talk you through how to use those objects, and definitely nice to see that being exposed within that custom report wizard. So thanks, Brenda. Sure. So next up is distribution and inventory. This is an area that Intacct is focused on, and we'll talk about that warehouse dimension that they've released in release number 2 of this year. But partially, a part of this enhancement is adding a new dropship workflow. So what that means is if you do utilize the dropship process, let's just say I have a customer that I bill, so I had created a sales order, I created a sales invoice, I've billed the customer, and on that sales invoice, which is a part of my order entry transaction definitions, I decided to click this dropship checkbox. What I can then do is, let's just say a part of that transaction, I am actually a warehouse buying a set of different laptops from Office Depot, or desks from Office Depot. Well, once I assign a vendor to that sales invoice and I select dropship, what it will do is actually generate a purchasing transaction. So probably a purchase order, which would be the biggest use case, to allow you to actually go in and order that product or even if it's non-inventory, that service from that particular vendor. So the nice thing about this dropship workflow is that it ties and leaves an audit trail with the originating sales transaction. So if I invoice and I've assigned it a vendor, selected that dropship, it's going to actually show that it's tied to that PO. So you see here I've got a sales order from S. Taylor that was created for power strips and a 21-inch monitor. Well, it's also tied to a purchase order for those particular vendors too. So nice model. A lot of our clients are utilizing dropship, so it potentially saves you some or puts in some efficiencies in terms of creating some of those transaction flows for you. Next up is warehouse. So we talked about this during our last release webinar, but just to give everyone a refresher, warehouse is a dimension that was released within inventory control to give you all the dimensional power that you may have felt for all the other dimensions that are there. Part of that, and I just plopped in an example in here, a financial report can then be expanded by a warehouse just like you have the expansion capabilities with the other dimensions. It's going to add more value and granularity to your financial reports. So the big update with regards to warehouses is the ability to go in and require the location. So if you're currently utilizing the warehouses dimension, you probably noticed that prior to this, the location ID or entity was not required. It's now always required. So when you're creating new warehouses, it's just going to show up in red, as you can see in that photo below, that Texas is, or some type of a location is required. If you do have warehouses that are set up without a location right now, the next time you actually go in and edit that warehouse, it will actually turn back an error and say, hey, a location is now required. So to avoid that process, you can just go in right now and within your environments and just assign it those locations, and that way you don't run across that error later. This is just nice to tie warehouses together, similar to the trend that you're seeing or you have probably been noticing over the past year with dimensional relationships in Intacct. Warehouse as a dimension can be related to the location that you're operating in. So nice, nice streamlined update there. This goes along with what Brenda was talking about with the project, some of the new objects that were created within the custom report wizard. Same idea here. There's now serial number tracking in the custom report wizard. So this screenshot here just shows you pretty much how to create a custom report using that wizard. The left-hand side just kind of exposes the different objects. So purchase document entry tracking detail, sales document entry tracking detail. Those are a few of the new objects that were released to give you access to maybe you have a serial number or a lot number for each of your inventory items that you actually want to report off of. Really similar for many of our clients that are utilizing the fixed assets module in Intacct as well. You're probably thinking, well, it'd be nice for me to show a report that has the asset tag or the asset serial number. Same idea here. You have now a data source or an object that has been exposed to allow you to go in and track more detailed inventory. So nice, nice feature. And as I mentioned, definitely reach out to us as your consulting team if you've got questions about custom reports. And it is easier to kind of get lost within that report wizard, but it is a very powerful feature. And as you utilize it even more and more, you'll be able to kind of generate these very specific reports. Order entry, and as I mentioned, purchasing has also kind of been a big theme over the past year as well. Order entry's had a few updates with regards to some of the different types of transaction activities that you can do. For our clients that are bringing in recurring transactions, and remember when we say order entry is an extension to accounts receivable. So same subledger as accounts receivable, but you get more of a robust sales process. And what Intacct made available in this release is essentially the ability to go in and do an import via CSV or through the API and actually define the payment details. If it's a recurring transaction that you're bringing in from another system, it's a high likelihood that you also want to associate a payment to those recurring transactions, right? So this feature allows you to kind of put in those payment details. Also, what you may have noticed if you've been poking around with the use of renewal macros in the past is some updates to renewals, and in this case they're more so called renewal templates now. So you won't actually see the words renewal macro in your Intacct environment. And so what Intacct has done is they've said, well, here's a better interface for handling your renewals. And if we step back a little bit, what are renewals? Well, I have a contract that I was getting into, and it is set for up for renewal at the end of this year. Well, what the renewal macros allowed you to do is send an email to the salesperson maybe 10 days before that sales invoice or that contract was done, and actually say, well, hey, salesperson, please go in and contact your customer to renew their contract. And so part of the limitations with those macros before is they were very difficult to edit, and they were actually kind of discouraged by Intacct in terms of their use and functionality. And so what Intacct did was come up with these better enhanced renewal templates to say, well, here's a template that you can assign to each transaction. What is it going to include? Well, I want to generate or create an actual sales order 10 days prior to that renewal date, right? And in addition to that, I'd like to send the customer an email that says, dear customer, you're up for renewal, here's a quote, so on and so forth. So makes it nice, just some updates with regards to the use or the setup of the template. Reporting and insights. This has also been a constant theme that that you may have noticed as we've been presenting over the past few quarters. Dashboards, I don't think I've ever not utilized dashboards or recommended dashboards. It's something that definitely I think all of our clients should utilize. Intacct came out with the digital board book. So if you are a big part of our customer base is actually SaaS based customers, and it's nice to be able to put those metrics onto a visual display, and that's what the dashboard exists with. So this is just a snapshot of how the digital board book looks. What's nice about this board book that Intacct came out with is these formulas are all geared or being updated based upon your real-time sales data. So let's just say I created a sales order and I needed to calculate a part of that sales order. I needed to put in, of course, the start and end date of the contract, so what's the term in months, and maybe I needed to calculate different metrics, like what is the monthly recurring revenue, the MRR, for these sets of transactions. Maybe within the customer's account, I noted that the customer has canceled or been terminated. What is my my rate or my churn for the customer? So a lot of these formulas have been created by Intacct through this digital board book, and it's nice to be able to see a combination of performance card, graphs, reports that you can plop all into a dashboard. So very, very popular amongst our SaaS company clients, and I'm actually in a few right now, and it's nice to be able to take that data and have it do the work for you. Some of the other areas of improvement, nothing too fancy here, but the footer length here in the financial reports has been expanded a bit. So if you did go into the page setup in columns tab in the financial report writer, there's a tab for the formatting where you can actually go in and expand that length. So I know it's hard to kind of envision the characters in the dashboard components where it asks you, well, do you want to expand the pixel count for your components? It's hard to kind of give you an exact example of how many pixels you should use. You're kind of eyeballing it, right? So same idea with regards to the footer. Definitely utilize, if you're making changes to that footer length, just preview the report in PDF. You can see it real time as to what the character length is, and then you can make updates there. So. Also, we talked about data delivery service in our last release conversation, where you can actually go in and we all have been used to, many of our clients utilize the cloud storage, so pushing reports from Intacct, which is on the cloud, to another website like Dropbox or Google Drive to actually go in and store reports there. Data delivery service has given our clients the ability to push transaction level activity into into similar types of cloud storage providers. And what's nice about data delivery service is in this latest release, they've exposed roles to be exported as well. Why is that important? Well, if you are trying to conduct an analysis on your GL system about the various controls that you have in Intacct for all of the members of your team, some of those data points may be helpful to plug into like a BI software or some type of an analytics software that says, here's who has access to do what in my system, right? This person gets the ability to create vendors, but this person cannot create AP bills. I don't have a member of my team that creates vendors and AP bills and has the ability to pay it out. Those are all different internal controls type challenges that we're constantly able to address. So it's nice that the data delivery services expose the roles.
Great. Thanks, Manesh. We've got a number of other enhancements that we wanted to let you know about as well. So if you recall, earlier this year, Intacct rolled out Collaborate to all users. So now they've done some enhancements to Collaborate. So previously when you logged into the system, the only place you could see your notifications was in the little chat bubble that was next to your name. So if you weren't a frequent user of the system, it was really easy to miss if anybody had sent you any notifications. So now under your My Preferences on the page, you have the ability to let to decide when you want to be emailed those items as well. So you can be emailed if somebody posts on your page, comments on a post that you make, posts on something that you follow, or does an @mention for you, so they're specifically asking you a question. So you can select all or none of those if you don't want to receive them, and then you can also get your activity for any groups that you belong to. If any activity in those groups happens, you can get an email notification as well. So it's really making Collaborate a lot more collaborative and a lot more real time, so that can be much more useful. If somebody's asking you an urgent question and you only log into the system once a week to do your AP approvals, that might not be the most effective way to reach out to somebody, and then they're going to email you anyways, and then that answer to that email is not going to be with the record because you didn't answer it through Collaborate. So I think this really makes Collaborate a lot more useful to how we're used to being able to work in kind of an online environment. They also did an update to the password security. So for any companies that are provisioned after August 2016, the never option for resetting your password has now been eliminated. So what that means is usually when it started, that was intended to be used only for APIs or any third-party integrations where you had to create a user and you wanted to make sure that that user was going to be available in perpetuity. However, people were adding it to their actual user records, and because this is a financial system, that's not a best practice. So they have eliminated the never option there. So you want to make sure that your integrations and APIs can still maintain that connectivity, so you can go into their individual user record and select the Keep My Password Until I Reset It option for just that user. So now the least frequent basis on which you can reset your password is going to be yearly. And it's highly encouraged for anybody that has a company that was provisioned prior to August 2016, if you are using the never option, to go in and pick something that's a little bit more frequent than never. All right, this is a really exciting update for a lot of our nonprofit clients or for anybody that's utilizing the user-defined dimensions. So previously, if you created an AR invoice, an AP bill, or other AP or AR transactions and you tagged a user-defined dimensions, you had no way to update the dimension without either deleting or reversing or reposting the transaction with the correct dimension. So what that did is it separated that adjustment from the original transaction because there was no way to go back and actually use the reclassify. So now the reclassify button is available for the user-defined dimensions. So just as you would reclassify a transaction based on the standard dimensions, you can now reclassify with the UDDs there. So that keeps all of that information tagged to the original record and lowers the risk that you're either going to forget to reclassify it or worse, do it twice. For any of our companies that are operating in multi-currencies, the Cash Management Revaluation Report has been pretty substantially redesigned here. So now it supports more transaction types. So previously it was only supporting checks and deposits. So now it's also showing the funds transfers, receipts, and other deposits as well. It also is excluding any general ledger transactions that are made with a non-bank currency. So for example, if you received a donation in pounds sterling, but you deposited it into your US dollar account, previously that would have been brought into the cash management reval report, but it didn't need to be revaled because your base currency was US dollars, so as soon as somebody wired you or you deposited a check in that other currency, it would have automatically been revaluated into the base currency at the time of deposit. So now, and it also includes a location filter. So if you are in a multi-entity or multi-location instance there, you can filter the cash management revaluation report so you can get accurate comparison when you're looking at the general ledger. So that's a really exciting development there. And then our last enhancement for today is actually as it relates to the customer aging. So this is a really exciting item here. So you can now add the custom aging buckets to a statement as well as to an invoice. So now your customers don't have to wait until they receive their statement at the end of the month to know that they still have outstanding items due. You can print it right at the bottom of the invoice. So where you would go to find this is either under Platform or Customization Services and looking at Document Templates. If you look at the Intacct statement that has been newly added to the Document Templates area, you can either take that custom statement and modify it as needed, or what a lot of our clients have been doing is actually grabbing all of the coding for that aging buckets and going and putting it on your own statement or invoice that has your logo and your information on it there as well. So that's really exciting to have these aging buckets right on your statements so they can pay the right invoices first. So in conclusion, we've covered quite a lot of updates in this one. Workflow updates, updates for project accounting, as well as for distribution and inventory, order entry, reporting and insights, and then a number of other enhancements as well.
Thanks, Brenda. So we do have a few questions that came in, but of course, as always, if anyone has any additional questions that they would like to submit at this time, you are perfectly welcome to. And of course, we will share Brenda and Manesh's contact information. So if you have follow-up questions after the webinar is over, you're also welcome to contact them that way. So first up, for the spend management feature, are we able to include dimensions as part of the control to stop or warn at the time of creating a purchasing transaction? Or is it just a value-based control? And Manesh, I think that one came in during one of your sections.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Megan. So definitely when you're actually going in and configuring a budget as a part of the spend control, you're going to go assign the budgetable period. You're going to assign the duration as well. So if it's like let's just say a month, then you would select that. You could then put in whether you want to stop or warn, and then yes, the dimensions are available for you to go in and validate, including the actual amount of the transaction. So that would just be basically just checkboxes that you would select and say, well, I need to include department, I need to include the location dimension, and the system will then validate based upon the item that you select and that department and location, whether it is under or over that particular spend. So yeah, you'll be able to go in and select which dimensions you'd like.
Thanks, Manesh. And I've got one more for you, and then Brenda, I've got one other one up here for you as well. But Manesh, how would someone set up a pre-printed Canadian check stop? Does it work the same way as the usual pre-printed ones?
Yeah, so definitely the same way. You're going to go in and actually edit that checking account, and maybe currently, most likely, if you are a Canadian entity, you probably have the blank check Micro check stock actually selected within that checking account's record. So you can actually go in and select the pre-printed check stock instead. And then once you go in and select the pre-printed check stock, you just want to make sure that the company address obviously does not print, because in pre-printed Canadian check stock, that address should actually already be on the check. In addition to that, it works the same way. You'd be able to upload your signature, or if you do have a two-signature type of check, you can go in and upload both of those, and you'll be able to select the printing format. So if you are used to the blank checks, it's highly likely that you have some type of a 3-panel check, so you'll be able to identify whether you would like the check to be printed at the top or the middle or on the bottom. And other than that, it works the same exact way as pre-printed checks from the US.
Thanks, Manesh. And I do have one more question for you guys today. In spend control, if the budget is exceeded, instead of denying the transaction, can you send it to someone else for approval of the over budget spend?
I can answer that one too, spend
All right,
management. Yeah. Yeah, so with regards to the actual follow-up, that transaction is not going to make its way to that budget owner. I suspect that this could be on the roadmap in the future, but definitely not now. What the transaction warning is going to do is say, well, reach out to that budget owner. It may not even be a user of Intacct, right, an employee user or business user. Reach out to that budget owner, and then the budget owner will then be able to make some of those changes. It really depends on the organization, right? Every shoe doesn't fit every single client. So based upon who's actually loading your budgets, let's just say the GL accountant of an organization is loading budgets, and they're obviously getting the budgets based upon figures provided from all the different department vice presidents. Those department vice presidents may not be actually users or employee users in Intacct, but they're providing all this data to that GL accountant. GL accountant will then go in and load or create those budgets. So that warning specifically is going to say reach out to the budget owner. The budget owner will then be able to say, sure, pass it through. If it is a warning, then it'll act as a warning, and then that person can then just hit submit again, and that warning will be saved as a part of that transaction's history. If it is actually going to stop you, then the budget owner would need to make a change within their budget to allow you to go in and insert that transaction. So really it's meant to be a control measure. If you can envision, we have clients that utilize the purchasing workflow and do thousands of transactions. It's nice to be able to have a control in there that says, whoa, we've reached the spending limit on the admin department for the San Francisco office. We need to go in and we need to put a stop or a warning there. So.
Thanks, Manish. And we actually did get another question in a moment ago, so I will make sure that we get that one. Where do we add the customer aging to invoices?
Okay, I can take this one. So for this one, if you want to use the statement that Intacct released, so you'll go to platform or customization services, depending on what your organization has. Look at the document templates, and they recently added a new template in there called Intacct Statement. So at the bottom of the statement, they've got all the coding for the aging buckets. So you can go ahead and copy that information from the Intacct statement, and then depending on what you have set as your default, and as a reminder, you set your default invoice and statement. You set it under accounts receivable and then accounts receivable configuration in that third setup panel. And down the bottom there, you can choose what the default statement is for all of your customers, as well as the default invoice. So you can take that coding that you've copied from the Intacct statement and add it to your invoice. So that invoice is also going to be located in the templates. So once you know which one that needs to be edited, or if you have a separate invoice per customer, you can also set those preferences per customer as well. And then you'd find that on the customer record as well if they had a different default than the standard default. And then you can update all of your invoices to include those aging buckets. So once again, that's either platform or customization services. Go to document templates and then find the Intacct statement, copy all of that coding down the bottom for the aging buckets, and then you can add it to any of your custom documents there.
Great. Thanks, Brenda. That actually does wrap up our Q&A session today. I know we're ending a little bit early, but I hope that everyone can appreciate an extra 15 minutes back in your day. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to contact Manish or Brenda directly. As I mentioned, their contact information is up on the screen, but we will be sending out the slides, so no need to hurry up and write that down right now if you don't already have their contact info. As you exit today's webinar, there will be a quick survey, so please take a moment to let us know your thoughts on the webinar today so we can make sure to continue bringing you solid content that is relevant to your roles. So thank you, Manish and Brenda, as our webinar speakers today, and to all of our webinar attendees.